Jackie wrote an op-ed for the New York Times about the FBI, and I reached out to some people I know in the FBI. I'm so plugged in. And and wanted to see if Jackie would talk to us. She's a former FBI senior executive who led critical investigations and national initiatives across the bureau. She played a key role in the 9/11 investigation and went on to oversee major field operations in New York, Philadelphia, and beyond. So, with experience, I'm at hi Jackie. By the way, I love your hair. I wish I
Oh,
got to let my hair grow out like that, but one
you
day.
can go for it. Thank you.
With experience spanning investigative, operational, and executive leadership, she's guided teams through high stakes moments while strengthening strategy, communication, and public trust. She also led the FBI Science and Technology Branch, advancing innovative solutions to support national security and law enforcement efforts. Anyway, thank you so much for doing this, Jackie. I wanted to talk to you because I read your op ed in the New York Times last month, and the title of the op ed was I Was an FBI Agent for 25 Years. Kash Patel is Playing a Dangerous Game. Um, so, first of all, why did you want to write this op ed? And I think it's so prescient because of what's happening in Iran and sort of the increased terror threat that many people are worried about. But just first, what motivated you?
Yeah, I think exactly like you said, the Iran war was a big motivator in it. I've been out of the FBI now for it's about 14 months, and I've seen lots of things continue to go on, and former colleagues just outright fired, and the leadership just seemingly focused on other things. And I think when we went to war with Iran, that really struck me as, there's always threats going on. But when we're in an environment, a situation like this, the FBI has to be at the top of its game. It always does, but especially when the stakes are so high, when the threat, Iran is the biggest state sponsor of terrorism and has been for years. And I think the leadership has been very distracted by lower priority items, by having fun on their watch. And I think it was time to speak out.
I want to talk about the terror threat in a moment, but I also want to talk about sort of what happened to the FBI when Kash Patel became the director of the FBI. I know in the piece you write that you were pushed out along with several other senior executives. What happened? Why were you and others pushed out of the agency?
That's a great question. I served 25 years. My colleagues at the same level as as other executive assistant directors, had all served, well over 20 years. This was our career. This was our calling. We were not political. We had served through a number of presidential administrations. I think I served through, five different administrations, both Republican and Democrat. I'd served through a number of directors. I got in 2000 under Director Free. I served for 12 years for Director Mueller. I served for Director Comey, for Director Wray. And about 2 weeks after inauguration last year, we had already by that point lost our former director when it was, made known that Kash Patel would be nominated. Our deputy director was also pushed out on inauguration day. And I was one of the next level of executives, the next six executive assistant directors. And about the second week after inauguration, we were informed by then Department of Justice leadership that we would be fired. This was on a Thursday, that we would be fired the following Monday if we didn't, resign or retire by that point.
And as somebody had served what you said 25 years, Jackie, in the
Mhm.
FBI, that must have been devastating for you and so many other people who had dedicated so much of their careers to the FBI.
It was, I was very fortunate to have the career I did. I loved every minute of it. We all have bad days, even the bad days in the FBI, just to serve the mission and the public service, and just the work that we were fortunate enough to be able to be part of, and to be forced out. And we asked, why? What's the reason?
Yeah, I was gonna say, why? What explanation did they give you?
The explanation was sort of the line being given to many people, including many Department of Justice attorneys, then was that we could not be trusted to carry out the president's agenda. And I know my response was similar to a lot of other people that, we were FBI agents not to carry out any agenda. And I will acknowledge, priorities change with different presidential administrations, but we don't carry out anyone's agenda. We carry out the US Constitution. That's what we do. And it was a jolt to us because, again, we were not political. I was a career public servant, just like my colleagues, just like so many of my former colleagues who have been forced out since.
I'm reading a question. It's long. How is Homeland's okay? Well, I'm going to get to that question in a second. But how many people in all, Jackie, were pushed out or asked to?
Yeah, I've honestly, Katie, I've lost count at this point. When I left, there were 6 of us, executive assistant directors. At the same time, there were 2 special agents in charge and heads of field offices. So there were 8 total then, but there's been dozens of others either forced out, forced to retire, or outright fired. As recently as within just the past couple of months, uh, agents who have only been in for, a shorter number of years, who were doing their job and working cases, and those cases just happened to be against the current president, and they were fired just because of their work. And in the FBI, you don't get a choice of picking and choosing cases. You work, and these cases were court authorized. There was, we have a lot of oversight where there is some independence, but they and not political, but there is oversight by the courts. So I think, in at last count, it's dozens and really well over 100.
In fact, I know at the end of March, as you well know, Jackie, 3 former FBI agents sued the FBI and the DOJ, claiming they were targeted for their role in investigating efforts to overturn the 2020 election. So, is this obviously gives you pretty good insight into why some of these people were canned. Have you heard from colleagues about that? I'm just curious. You must talk to, I mean, you were there for 25 years. I'm sure you're very close to people who are still there and your former colleagues. Is this something the 2020 election and the efforts to show they were rigged and any investigation into that? Do you think that that was one of the reasons other executives and agents were fired?
I think so. I think their involvement in cases that are disliked by the current administration, whether it was looking into 2020 election, looking into the classified documents that were being held at Mar-a-Lago, a number of different investigations, different things, and just for the mere fact that people worked on those cases, they're being fired. For myself, for my colleagues, I think it was because we had been, you know, put in our positions by the previous FBI leadership, by the previous director. So at the same time a lot of reasons they're pushing people out, and no reason they're pushing people out.
You wrote in the op-ed, the current sophomoric leadership of the FBI is concerning. Mr. Patel's rushed judgments and prolific social media posts undercut the Bureau's professionalism. Seems to me you're not a big fan of Director Patel's, and I'm curious if you could kind of help us understand the sentiment within the FBI, the people who are still there, and maybe the consternation at the way he was running the Bureau?
Yeah. Yeah, Katie, it's tough for me to watch what's going on. Like I mentioned before, I served under a number of former directors. The majority of my career was, about half my career was under former Director Mueller. And as we know, he just passed away a couple of weeks ago. And I Yeah, it would be derelict of me not to talk about Director Mueller and his
I was gonna
leadership.
say,
Mhm.
what a fine human he was, and what a disgusting post the President of the United States posted on social media about his death. It was just absolutely disgusting.
I couldn't agree more. It was a vile post. Director Mueller served for 12 years as FBI director. Before that, he was a decorated Marine. He, was injured in Vietnam.
Won a
Served,
Purple Heart and a Bronze Star.
exactly, served for many years as a federal prosecutor. Director Mueller, had a privileged upbringing with his family, with his education. He could have done anything that he wanted for himself, and instead, he did everything he could for our country. And now to see what's going on and see, sort of performative actions of the current leadership and of Kash Patel with his social media post, with his, various appearances, at the Olympics, of course, is a very good example. I think the current workforce is still dedicated. They are skilled. They are committed to the mission of the FBI, which is to protect the American people and uphold the US Constitution. And they want to continue to do that. All this other stuff, though, it's unfortunate distractions getting away from the good work of the men and women of the FBI who just want to continue that good work.
It's really like dignified versus undignified, really, in some ways. Also, competence versus incompetence, I think, is what we're seeing. I want to ask you about these terror threats because obviously, with the president's increasingly bellicose